everyone. I'm Linda Nickel, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. My goal here is to help us all connect, inspire, and create. If this is your first time joining us, we do this every week here on Zoom with a new photography-related topic and a guest speaker that shares their expertise, creativity, and a little inspiration. You can find a list of upcoming presentations on my website at lindanickel.com. And if you miss a session, you can always find them linked to my YouTube channel. So please consider subscribing so that you don't miss a thing, because I will sneak in a bonus session from time to time, like I did over the weekend. I recorded a session with retired commercial photographer and someone that I consider my mentor, Russ Moore. We sat down and talked about how photography technology has changed and looked at some of his images while he shared the story behind the shot. In Russ's presentation titled Film DSLR Mirrorless, Keeping Up with Technology. Also new this week is an article posted by guest blogger Greg Daly. Greg's article, How to Get Rich Shooting Photography, 6 Professional Tips, talks about photography or how photography will enrich your life through mentoring, building friendships, and how it constantly challenges your skill set. So drop by the community blog and give it a read. If you have a story that you'd like to share, check out our invitation on the website and submit your story through the link. My guest tonight is Ruth Hoyt. Ruth is a full-time naturalist, nature and wildlife photographer, writer, and field guide based in deep South Texas. She has taught and led workshops for the National Park System, and her work has been exhibited by the Smithsonian Institute of America. Ruth's images have been published by National Geographic Books, the Nature Conservancy, Texas Monthly, and the Texas Wildlife Association, just to name a few. In tonight's presentation, Perspective and Practice, Ruth Hoyt shares her knowledge about how perspective affects photographs and that certain practices can take your work to the next level. She'll discuss the differences in camera gear and techniques she uses when photographing, depending on the location of the camera and subject, and we'll get a peek of her working from a kayak. So with that, welcome back to the Happiness Hour, Ms. Hoyt.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's great to be back again. I don't remember if this is my 3rd or 4th time, but I love doing this with you.
It's four. It's 4. Yeah. So I'm so happy to have you back tonight. And I know about your new kayak adventures, and I think if you guys follow her on Instagram, she's posted a couple of photos with her in the kayak. So hopefully tonight we'll get a little bit more of a peek at what she's doing back there.
All right, so tonight I'm going to be talking about perspective and practice, as I said. So I'll start sharing my screen and jump right into the program. So tonight we're going to hear about my perspective and practices. Probably should be plural practices, but perspective and practice is the name I gave this program because it has to do with perspective on how you take your pictures and then putting into practice what you've learned. So I like to start out with something that should grab everybody's attention, and I hope this does, because I do have some bullet points and I don't like to go too long without showing a picture. I'm a photographer, we're visual. So this is one of my wet green jay pictures. It's the best one I've ever taken. Haven't seen anything quite like this since, but it was taken from a photo blind, which I will talk about that too. So about me, my Instagram is the best way you can find me, and I'm at Ruth Hoyt Photo on Instagram. I do have a website, but I'm negligent about keeping it up to date. I'm mostly known for my bird photography, but I do have other lives. I'm interested in many things, including music, and I've had Weimaraners. I love doing photography of other things. And most recently, I've been working with colored pencils and watercolors. So I do have other things that I like to do, but the bird photography is probably the most prominent thing in my life. So this is a picture that I use for my publicity. It was taken well, not that long ago, but just a few years ago when an Audubon's Oriole landed on my hand. And it's such a cool thing to happen. He even came in the blind with us. And you just have to know what the bird wants, and you can pretty much get them to do what you want. All right, so what we're going to talk about today are the 4 basics and the wow factor very quickly, and then working with wildlife, and then into my program perspective and practice, and then I'll take some Q&A at the end. So the 4 basics for great photos, if you're one of my students, you've had this drilled into your head, so I'm just going to gloss over them without even any pictures, just the 4 basics for great photographs. The first thing is you need to have your picture in focus. If it's not in focus, where it's supposed to be, it's not a working photo. You want your exposure to be proper, whether it's dark or light, high key, low key. The exposure needs to be appropriate for what you're trying to do. Composition has to do with the arrangement of the subjects or subject within the frame, and that's all up to you. And then the content of the photo, which is the story that the photo is telling. And an optional bonus is the wow factor. When you first see an image, hopefully you have a reaction like, when you see this, you might say, wow. And like the green jay you saw at the beginning, I think these birds have a wow factor too. They're very colorful, they're interacting, they're touching beaks, yet they're looking at the camera. So you get a connection with them. But before we move on, let me share just a few more tips. Quick tips for wildlife photography. I can't talk about taking pictures of wildlife without at least mentioning practicing good ethics. And that's to make sure that you're not doing anything that would harm the animal or landscape, whatever you're photographing. So I know the old saying is take pictures, leave footprints, and hopefully not big footprints. Knowledge of your subject. It's very important to know what your subject is before you start taking pictures of it, because it helps you anticipate what they might do. It also helps with practicing good ethics. You want to be aware of your movement and the sounds that you're making, because many subjects that I photograph are very shy and would rather run away or fly away or jump away or swim away if they knew I was there. So I practice being very quiet and moving slowly. And finally, I like to talk about an escape route. And you might be thinking that the escape route is for you, and it can be, but I think it's also important for the animal to have an escape route too. If you're photographing wildlife, they need to feel like they aren't cornered where they feel trapped. When animals are frightened, they either take flight or they fight. And by fighting, it means biting or reaching out. So always have an escape route for you and your subject. Now, about perspective, how low can you go? I was lying on my stomach for this picture, and I know you were probably expecting all bird pictures tonight, but I pulled pictures out that I thought might get some kind of a reaction. Yes, I was lying on my stomach for this photograph, and I don't know, would you? Would you? Some people would, some people wouldn't. I did have a spotter. I had somebody standing on the right side of the picture, which would be where there would be no shadows cast onto the picture. And he was holding a snake tong ready to pick it up if it got too close. The problem was he kept picking it up before it got where I wanted it for the picture, because I was using a macro lens and I was hand holding so I could move around. I thought the tripod would hinder me in moving if I needed to move quickly. This picture was taken with a cell phone, and I don't know if the sound comes through, but she's rattling. I did take this picture. It's not the best way that I would have wanted to take the picture. I was posing the snake for the people who were in the photo blind. So they were at the right level. They were shooting from the proper perspective to get the full impact of this photo. I wasn't close. I put my phone on 2x when I was doing the little video. So it looks like I'm a lot closer than I really am. I do like to use a long lens when I'm photographing subjects that might produce a problem for me. So I always say safety first. And so this is a picture that a friend took of me when I was photographing a rattlesnake. It's the setup that I use. So when you look at the side view, you can see that I've got a wood frame with a piece of plexiglass with a hole cut out, and the snake has been placed in front of that log. If you look closer, you can see that the hole is just barely big enough for that lens to fit through. And I got some nice pictures, which you'll see in just a minute. But at one point I said, okay, I think I've taken enough of this snake. It's in a good posture, good pose. The tongue is out, the tail is up. Everything is what I want. But I think I'd like to switch to my macro lens. And so I pulled the 16 to 35 millimeter lens out in order to do that. And as soon as I did that, I put it right back in, because there I was looking at the snake with nothing between us. So that was handheld at 16 to 35 millimeter lens. The lens was at 16 millimeters. And this is what the photo looked like without any cropping. So you can see there's plenty of room to crop, but I really wanted to get my macro lens out, but I didn't. So instead I cropped, and that's how that looks. And I love the way the snake takes the same shape of the log that's behind it. And you can see that the eye is sharp, the tongue is sharp, the rattle is moving, so it's slightly not sharp because of the movement. So if not low, want to get high? Oh, but not that kind of high. I was standing over this snake, and I was using my 24 to 70 millimeter lens, and I was at 24 millimeters. So yes, I was pretty close. This is uncropped. And what I was doing was I had a friend spotting me. As a matter of fact, it's the same friend who was spotting me when I was doing the previous snake picture, Paul Denman, good friend from the Valley, good shooter. Anyway, he was standing right by the rattlesnake in front of it to keep its attention on him. And I came up from behind the snake and straddled it, wearing my snake boots and making sure that it never took its eyes off of Paul. You can see again, the tongue is sharp, the eye is sharp if you can see it, and the rattle is moving. So moving right along, let's go to the photo blind. I do work from photo blinds. It's another perspective that lets you get close to birds and other mammals. Well, anything, not just birds and mammals, any kind of wildlife, because they may or may not know you're there. Sometimes if the bugs are bad, I wear a bug suit in addition. So this is me wearing a bug suit. I did a selfie. Things were not happening outside the blind at that moment. So I took a few selfies to use them for a slideshow like this. This is a photograph that I took several years ago, and it was with a 500 millimeter f4 lens on a tripod. But the problem was this cat was curious, and it was close, and it was so close that I couldn't get the whole cat's face in the picture. So I had to take, well, what I did to solve that problem was I took the top 2/3 of the face from the eyes on up to the tip of the ears, and then I took it from the eyes down below and stitch it together in Photoshop afterwards. I've never stitched photos before, or I hadn't before then. And so that was a real learning experience. And what I found out was that each time you do it, it might come out slightly different. And so I did 2 or 3 different versions, but on none of them could I tell where the stitching is. And even if I gave you a high-res file to look at, I don't think that you would be able to find it. I don't even remember exactly where it is. So anyway, that was a little bit too close to be able to take the pictures that I wanted, but I took this as my insurance shot, and I actually really like how it turned out. And I did change lenses later, but this is how I took the picture that I like the best. All right, so I've got a series of pictures, and I was labeling all my photos tripod 600 millimeter original or 600 millimeter cropped. And you'll see that on these pictures. But as you go, you don't probably need to pay too much attention to that because that's not really what it's all about. I do have my favorite lenses, and I think just about everything, almost everything in this slideshow is with that 600 millimeter lens or 500 millimeter lens. The kayak pictures are, well, I'll explain that when I get there. But anyway, this is a photo taken from a photo blind, and you can see that I'm super low. There's actually dirt in the way of the picture in the foreground, and I don't really like that. And I don't like how this bird got down low also, because it doesn't pop out from the background. I cropped it a little bit to make more attention go on the bird rather than all of the surrounding. Here's a green jay that it just popped in there so quickly that I just quickly took a fast picture of it and bullseyed the green jay. So this is on the tripod with the 600 millimeter original with no cropping done. But then I cropped to put him off to the side so he wasn't bullseyed. What I don't like about this picture is his tail. And you'll see in some of my pictures, I prefer to have where the tail is showing in the bird's photo because otherwise it looks sort of off kilter, off balanced. Here's a picture of a little thrush, and this is just slightly cropped, but I want to show you how I worked on this picture to improve it. So again, it's on the tripod with the 600 millimeter. I put a grid over the picture so that you could see the, I'm going to say guideline for thirds. People call it the rule of thirds. There are no rules, but you can see that if I divide my screen into a grid like a tic-tac-toe and look at the 4 points where they cross, those are the points where it would be nice to put your main subject to draw attention to it. What is interesting about this is if you connect those two, the two left points, you'll see that the bird is in the left third mark through the picture from left to right. I'm going to take that off and now show you the bird is generally looking ahead, and I put a dotted line to show you how much space is in the photograph that's really, some people call it negative space, some people call it empty space, but what it does is it gives you room, it gives the bird room to look into or move into. If you look behind his tail, there's only a little bit of space behind his tail. So that keeps his balance within the picture, what I would call pleasing. All right, so here we have a kiskadee, a great kiskadee. It's a young bird. You can see the yellow in the corner of his beak. And that's when birds fledge. When they first fledge from the nest, they still have this yellow. You're going to learn a little bit about birdstein if you don't already study them. But anyway, when birds fledge from the nest, they still have this yellow. And what it does for the parent bird, when they're coming to the nest and they've got 3 or 4 babies in the nest, they look for that yellow, that light colored corner of the gaping mouth so that they can aim quickly with the food that they're feeding. Because if they don't feed them quickly, a lot of times they get pecked. So it's safety designed by Mother Nature. Here we have a little black crested titmouse, and this is a nice pose in my mind. If you're doing birds that aren't moving, it's a nice pose. It's pleasing because you can see one eye completely. It's at a 3/4 view facing the camera. You can see the full body shape from the crest at the top all the way to the tip of the tail. Some people are really critical when you don't have the tail in sharp focus. It really doesn't bother me too much. Sure, I'd prefer that it was in sharp focus, but it doesn't really bother me. It gives the bird a little bit of three-dimensional look to it rather than just something that you cut out and pasted onto the picture. Here we have a long-billed thrasher. And same thing with the tail. This one is more of a profile, but he's twisted a little bit. So his tail goes back more straight back than the titmouse's tail did. So his face is in a complete profile. You see that bright golden yellow eye, and you see the big curve in his beak. You see all the features of the bird that you're looking for. And I really like the log that I had set up for him to land on because of the bright chartreuse color at the bottom. I think it just sort of frames it all in, gives it some a frame. Again, we're working at super low angle from a photo blind. This is a black-throated sparrow. And now this one does have the tail in sharp focus. I think you can see the difference between that and what we had with the titmouse and the long-billed thrasher. You can almost see his other eye. And I'm glad it's the way it is. If you started to see the other eye, it looks a little bit odd. So this again is that 3/4, almost well, it's sort of in between, but it gives you the chance to see the beak, the shape of the head, the markings on its head, the partial eye ring under its eye, and then the black throat and chest. Here's another one. He's actually in the water getting wet, and birds are always going to try and go to the safest place when they put themselves out there. He's vulnerable when he comes to the water. So knowing that this is how they behave, I pulled up grass from the photo blind, from the pond at this photo blind, but I just sort of did a quick job because I wanted to get into the blind. So you can see that the grass has been plucked, pulled, and I thought I had everything pretty clean, but he found that grass and went right between. So this isn't a picture I would necessarily do anything with, but I keep these kinds of pictures for this purpose of teaching. Some people only show their best work. I do show my best work, but I also show things that I think can help other people learn and take good tips from it to help them. Same thing with this. The 2 painted buntings, I've never gotten a shot like that where one was right behind the other, almost echoing the first one. Plus the 4, you actually have 4 birds if you count the 2 reflections, the mirror in the bottom of the picture. And my label does cover up the bottom of the reflection. It's cut off a little bit, but it's in the real picture. Again, tripod 600 millimeter f4 lens. Sometimes when you're working with a bird, you're going to get a picture with a distant background. The background is so far away in this that there is no real definition to it. Some people like this look, some don't. I happen to like it in this bird because he's a very hard bird to get a picture of. It's a shy bird. It's called the blue grosbeak, and not very often do they land on the perches we have. They tend to stick in the bush, and they look around and make sure it's safe. They jump down to the ground and get a quick bath or get a quick drink, and then they're gone again. So this is sort of unusual to have him up on a perch like that. This one is another blue grosbeak. I was with other photographers, and I use the Canon R5 mirrorless camera. And when I photograph now, I put it in electronic shutter. It does 2 things. The electronic shutter on the R5 is completely silent, so I don't bother my birds and I don't bother other people. And it increases my frames per second. It takes the camera up to 20 frames per second. So when you have a very fast frame rate combined with a silent shutter, you can get pictures that you normally wouldn't. So it's one of my my favorite things about the mirrorless camera. Here we've got a cardinal. This is one of my typical perches that I've set up. Whenever I can find anything blooming, I like to add that to my perch area. And this is probably more just a tip about feeding birds and getting them to come to your perches, because I know he is feeding. I put some bird seed in that little hole down there just under the bird. But it shows in the background that you can have near and far background. And so I've got the real distinct flowers and they're in sharp focus, but in the background, you can see the trees and even a little bit of sky in the background. Some people hate showing sky in the background, but for me, I think it adds a little bit more of a third dimension. It doesn't feel like just a backdrop that you have on your studio area, outdoor studio. This little guy was so cute. Yellow warblers are just, they're cute as a button. They've got these big black puppy dog eyes, and they are so quick. And to get a picture of them is really hard unless they're going to spend some time there. And this little guy came down, he landed on a big perch. I'd much prefer him on a smaller perch, but he landed on a big one. So I took his picture. He's in a complete profile. You can see from head to toe, he is sharp as can be. The background is sort of a gradient. You can see different shades of light and dark back there. But then he turned around and the wind caught his feathers, and it just looks like a little skirt that got blown up. The pose of his face isn't exactly what I would have preferred, but it just was ever so brief, and I just love that picture. He's just a little ball of fluff. Here again, we've got the blue grosbeak, and he landed on this perch. He was supposed to land up where about his beak is, because that was nice and clear. You could have seen the feet, but birds don't always do exactly what you want them to do. Why did he land where there's a bunch of stickers and leaves and flowers? I don't know. He could have had that one little spot that's clean, but I put this in to show you, you can't control them. You can just try to guide them to where you want them. And I still like the picture. It's very natural. Here you got some interaction between birds, and neither of these cardinals neither has their crest up. I prefer birds with a crest up if they have one, but they're interacting with each other, and I think that's more about the story of the picture than necessarily having them with their crest up. I put some Mexican hat flowers beneath this perch to give a little bit of color to the bottom of it, because I didn't want all negative space down at the bottom. Here's our famous painted bunting. And again, it's one of those profile pictures. He's got his head just tilted a little bit toward us, which adds some interest. He's making eye contact with me as the photographer. He probably hears the cameras of the other people who are in the blind with me. I'm pretty silent now, and with my electronic shutter, but sometimes if you want to get their attention, you can put it on mechanical shutter, but I like the silent shutter myself. Now this one is not cropped. I could have lowered the branch or raised my camera a little bit to put him a little bit lower in the frame, but I sort of like the way I'm looking up at him. You can almost see just below his beak. All right, let's move on to the water. First with a kayak. So the pictures of me in a kayak are courtesy of Elaine Pruden. She's working with Linda tonight to run this program. So I owe Elaine a great big thank you, because I couldn't have done this myself. It would be really hard to make a selfie in a kayak. It's just not going to work. But we've been out a couple of times together, and we're going out again this Friday. I can't wait. But we start out early in the morning, and actually this one was much later in the morning than when we actually started out. So this was my first trip out with a kayak, and I used my 100 to 400 millimeter lens and just cropped the heck out of my pictures, because I didn't want to chance taking a 600 millimeter lens on the kayak and having a problem. My first time out on the kayak with a camera, I was just a little bit nervous. Well, actually, to be honest, I was a lot nervous. I kept it in a dry bag until I was ready to use it, and I pulled it out, and I did crop heavily to get these photos. I've got 4 pictures to share with you tonight. This one is a reddish egret, and I know it doesn't look red, but it's a white morph of the reddish egret. He was doing his little dance, and that's how I knew it was a reddish egret from a great distance. They have a very identifiable dance, they call it, and they dance around, darting around, chasing after fish and other things that they eat in the water. So anyway, I was down really low. You can see that the angle is low. I would have liked to have been even lower, but I was still just a little bit, well, a lot nervous about having a camera on the water like that. Here we go. And I love capturing action, and I just could not help it. Had a 2500th of a second. again, with the 100 to 400 millimeter lens. And I love freezing the water. If you look at the back leg, you can see that the water is frozen in space as the bird is kicking up, running along. I even got a pelican that day, and he was just flapping all around. If I remember correctly, he was bathing. And so he was splashing and jumping around and making a lot of disturbance in the water. That morning, we really had poor lighting, but the good thing about that was you don't have hard shadows. So what you compromise is you don't have good, strong lighting for fast shutter speeds unless you put the ISO up really high. But then on the other side, you don't have hard shadows. Here we got a turn, and it's just the last shot that I got. And I was really actually pretty close to him. So again, it's the 100 to 400 millimeter lens with a crop. So here we are. We've left really early in the morning. We actually left in the dark. So you can see that I'm applying safety first. I've got my light on. And if you look in the back of my kayak, you can see several things that are strapped in. One of them is a dry bag with my lens, camera and lens. I didn't take it out until I really, really wanted to use it. So this is a picture of me that Elaine took, and I'm actually using my cell phone. I kept that in a little Pelican case, and that was also tied down to the kayak because I didn't want to lose that. And the Pelican case would float if it did happen to fall in, but it was clipped to the kayak so it wouldn't fall out. You can see I've got my life preserver on the front. You have to have one when you go out. And the other things that you take out on a kayak with you are a whistle and let's see, the life preserver, the whistle, the light. I have a Hobie craft, which means I pedal instead of paddle, but I do have a paddling case, and I did use it. Here I am with my camera out, and I found that it worked really well. I have the 300 millimeter lens with the it's an f2.8 lens plus a 2x. So here I have my 600 millimeter lens. It's just with a 300 millimeter with a 2x on it. So it's much more portable. I get my 600 millimeters and I feel much more comfortable. I can handhold that lens, and that's what I used for my second trip out. And I think I feel comfortable enough that I'm going to make that my first choice of camera setup for going out. The camera with the 2x and the 300 millimeter lens fit in a dry bag, which I keep strapped into place until I'm ready to use it. Then once I'm ready to use it, I can pedal wherever I want to go, and I keep the camera between my thighs and balanced on the chair. My left hand is on my rudder, which steers me, and my right hand is really tightly holding on to the 300 millimeter lens. When I'm ready to take pictures, I put my pedals in balance so that one foot is slightly in front of the other, and I've got my left elbow propped right up against my left thigh, and that sort of forms a tripod with my body. My feet are two of the legs, my bottom is the third leg, and then I get the extra stability from my elbow braced up against my knee and thigh. So I only have this night heron that was nearby, and I was actually able to go up pretty close to it. I have pictures from a distance, but I just chose to put these in. So this is handheld, and it's the 300 plus the 2x, and he turned his head slightly before he started walking, and he actually looked at me, and I cropped in for that. That's definitely cropped. But I love how I have the 600 millimeters. It really makes a difference. All right, so let's move to the water with a float tube. And I have a little story before I show you a lot of that. You want to be really careful when you're working around water with your camera. And so my friend Debbie Thomas, oh, I say, yeah, but be careful. My friend Debbie Thomas was helping me. She is deathly afraid of water and will not go in the water, but she thought she could wade. And so she she was with me, and she was at the other end of the pond, and I'm at the middle of the pond with my 600 millimeter. And when she fell, I said, oh my gosh. I heard her laughing, and I thought, why is she laughing? She's going to scare the birds. Well, she was definitely laughing. And I snuck a few pictures, and I thought, I'm going to stop. I felt embarrassed about taking pictures of somebody who fell in the water, especially knowing that she was afraid of the water. But she was laughing, and she tried to get up, and she had a foot stuck in the mud, and she couldn't get her foot out of the mud. And then she looked to me for help. And when she saw the camera was aimed at her, she posed for the picture, and she's still laughing and promptly fell back down again. So anyway, she doesn't mind that I've included these pictures. She told me she was fine with it. She wondered why I hadn't shown any before. That's her taking off to go get dried off. So this is the whole pond. Well, actually, this is about 2/3 of the pond. You can't see the left side of it, but this is the pond that we were working in. And this is how I started. And this is another way to get down low. Debbie took this picture of me, and you can see that I'm camouflaged. I've got my lens sticking out, but that's the only thing sticking out. I'm hiding in and amongst the cattails. So really the birds don't know I'm there, but I had to hope that they would come close to me. And so here's a little bit closer view of the same setup. And this is from the other side. She came around and took a picture of me. And you can see that I'm sitting on a plastic wrapped cushion, so I didn't get my bottom wet. And I just picked up the camouflage fabric so you could see me. I did get a pair of hip waders for the float tube that we worked out. And this is Debbie. She loves building things. So we designed a float tube based on plywood. This is what it looks like when it's all assembled. I have a big old truck tire, and the plywood is on top of the truck tire, and she had drilled holes in it. So I secured it with rope, and then we put a piece of PVC and secured that. And then on top of that, I put the camera. On this particular day, I just put it on a cushion. I've since done other things since then. And then on top of that, you put the camouflage fabric. And here I am going into the blind. Right now in this picture, you don't see that the fabric is going to go over me, but it does once I get into the water. There again, I still don't have the camouflage fabric on top of me, but once I put that behind me, I basically look like a green blob in the water. It's not really essential to have the fabric over me unless you've got birds all around you and you don't want the birds behind you to see you. But typically when you first get in the water, the birds move away and they go to the other side of the water. So it didn't really matter that I had the fabric over me. This picture is cropped, but it's the only picture I have like that. So I think it's just fine to crop it. This one's not cropped. This is how close the birds you can get to them if you're in the float tube. I didn't tell you what those birds were, but we'll just start here. Actually, I'm not sure which duck this is, so I'll start with the next one. Here we have a yellow legs, and we have yellow legs that are greater yellow legs and lesser yellow legs. I believe these are the greater yellow legs. And they just walk around the water. Sometimes they'll bathe, sometimes they'll chase after fish and other things. But this is the kind of perspective that you get that you can't get any other way. I'm so close to the water. My lens is super close, actually. And, you know, when you first start doing this, you should be nervous. But once you get comfortable with it, you just say, it is what it is. This is not from a float tube. You can see that I don't have the low angle. This is on the pond at my house, and it's actually I'm sitting down on the dirt, but I'm not as low as I could be if I were in the float tube line. But you can see, if you look at these birds, you don't see the tops of their back, but when you're above them slightly, you do see the top of the back. There's nothing wrong with showing the top of the back. I just prefer the lower angle. This is another one from the float tube. And, you know, sometimes I think it's all right to have something in the environment that shows where you are. So the cattails are definitely a part of the pond. Here's a common yellow throat. And this was taken from the shore. I was just able to get super low because I took the camera off the tripod and rested it on the ground on that plastic pad. Another one. This one is a little bit, I'm going to say misty because I'm shooting through cattails and other vegetation. And I just really like the angle of it. It's not, it's crisp, the eyes are sharp, but everything else is not. And I just thought that that would be just sort of unique. It's facing dead on. It breaks a lot of the rules, but I thought it was a good way to end my slideshow. So thank you, and I'll ask questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm ready to answer questions.
Okay, so there's one question in here from Karen. She's wanting to know, are you walking in the tube or is it too deep to touch the ground?
Walking on my knees because the water was only 2 or 3 inches deep in some places and never really more than, I'm going to say 6 to 8 inches. So I'm not floating. The tube is floating, but I'm not.
Okay. Let me flip through here. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm seeing a lot of little cutest bird ever. That's the little yellow warbler. Daniel wanted to know, do you often or try to include foreground in your bird photography, or do you prefer to not include that?
It actually depends. No, I didn't mute. It actually depends on the bird and what kind of habitat it's in. So for instance, if I were taking a picture of a turkey, that's a very big bird, and I wouldn't be able to get much foreground in it unless it's out in the field. And a lot of times they will take dirt bath out in the field. And so I do want some setting that shows where it is. And I guess it depends on what you're going to use the picture for. If it's for a contest, a lot of times they want extremely close-ups. Extreme close-up seems to win contests more than showing the scene. But I'll tell you, I'm to the point where I want to enter what I like in a photo contest, and it's not so much about winning a contest. So I recently took a picture of a roadrunner, and it's got the whole valley behind it, and it's looking at the valley, and it's got its bill clattering, and so its mouth is open, and it's got, I included the whole scene, and I think it's sort of like the bird looking over its kingdom, its habitat. So I don't know, I tend to have, if I include anything more than just the bird, it's usually more background than foreground.
Okay. Sean is asking, on the perches, are you using any bird seed or any other incentive to bring in those birds?
Yes, I do put bird seed and suet on the perches. I am very careful and meticulous about placing it so that it doesn't show to the camera. And it might be a little bit deceptive, but I'm going to tell you, if you have 2 equal pictures and one has bird seed in it and the other doesn't, pretty much people are going to choose the one without the bird seed.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay, let me flip through here. Marianne is wanting to know, how do you go about creating an area that will draw birds in to photograph them? She's interested in setting up such an area. And help me, Ruth, I can't remember the name of it, but if you'll go back into our Happiness Hour library, Marianne, I believe that first presentation that Ruth did for us, she talks about setting up, it was backyard, but basically she gave you her suet recipe and some ideas on perches. And if you can't find that, if you'll message me, I'll send you the link to that. Ruth, do you remember what that was called? I can't remember the title of
Oh,
it.
it's probably setting up a photo blind, a portable outdoor studio.
That's right.
It's pretty obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mika's wanting to know, for that blind you used for the rattlesnake, was it a DIY portable one?
Yes. Again, it was something that Debbie created. She is very handy with a hammer and saw and nails and drills, and she's just really good at that kind of stuff. She always lets me help. We're going to call it help, but it's usually hold this, hand me that, go get this. I don't have too much to do with it, but I've watched and learned over the years, and I just let her run with it because she loves doing it, and I like using what she creates.
Yeah, they're great. They work for the purposes that you need them for. Irma's wanting to know, where did you get that camp fabric?
Oh, the camo fabric.
Mhm.
You can order that online.
Yeah,
You can spend a lot more money getting it from Academy or Bass Pro Shop, one of those kind of places.
yeah.
But you can find it online, Amazon.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any. Okay, wait a minute. Let's see if give people a second. Last call for questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any other than there is a statement, and I agree with Mika. We all need a Debbie in our lives. Wait a minute. I probably already have a Debbie. I think they're Karen's and Elaine's and Aaron's, so I shouldn't, but none of them build anything for me. So they need to jack up their skills here. All right, Ruth, thank you so much for yet another great presentation and coming back. You know that I appreciate you, and you get those texts from me late at night.
They're wonderful. I absolutely enjoy getting them.
I know I abuse my friends. So if you give me your phone number, I will abuse it. Everybody, you can connect with Ruth at ruthhoyt.com. And if you're on Instagram, please give her a follow at Ruth Hoyt Photo. Next week, Rick Beldegreen will be here to present wildlife photography, creating unique images. So until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.